So today I want to bring you a sermon about anger. Who here has ever been angry?
Right now.
What kind of things make you angry? Or have you been angry over?
My wife.
Well, people
Slow
don't
traffic.
forget.
I'd say slow traffic and slow people. Like anything I have to wait on.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. Obviously, anger is an intense emotional reaction, sometimes expressed with a noticeable behavior, but mainly it remains unexpressed. People kind of bottle it up and keep it inside. Anger is also a biochemical reaction. You get a rush of adrenaline, you get dilated eyes, your muscles become blood-filled, a sudden burst of energy. This biochemical reaction brings us to the widely known fight or flight response. You get that sudden burst of adrenaline. It's, oh, something's going on, I need to do something. That brings out the fight or flight response. You also get that when you're angry. You get steaming, your blood pressure rises. There's two kinds of anger defined in the Bible. There's sinful anger and righteous anger. We'll start with sinful anger. And Pastor Brian brings up that slow drivers and things tend to get him angry. Several years ago, I'd only been on the department for a couple of years, and we get a run goes out on the freeway, road rage. A couple guys driving crazy. There's a third-party caller, female. She's following them up the freeway. They're cutting each other off. They're yelling at each other. Hands are flying out the window. At some point, she sees a gun, what she believes is a gun. So she calls. They're giving us information. We're trying to get units up on the freeway. She continues to follow. She's going the same direction, not out of her way. And at some point, there's a minor fender bender between the two as they're going down, yelling at each other. And shots are fired. She's airing this. She can see shots being fired from one car to another. All of a sudden, both cars pull over. One of the gentlemen gets out. She is now, as she passes, she sees the gentleman who had fired from the car go up and shoot the gentleman in the car.
Wow.
Shoots and kills him on the side of 270, all out of road rage. Wow. She then in turn almost wrecks. She pulls off the side of the road. We get to her, and she's just a complete wreck. These two gentlemen's anger have now spilled over to her, who had no involvement in this, but now she has to deal with this gentleman's actions in the long run. That's things that we don't think about. The effects that our anger has on others. Be it the person you're yelling at, be it somebody who's witnessed it. I believe that God can guide us away from the age of anger and rage that we're currently in. Those situations have just been amplified. They're all over the place. Somebody feels that they've been disrespected or they didn't get their way. There's a thing on the news this morning where a lady's in the barber shop, pulls a gun on a barber because she feels he's taking too long to cut her child's hair.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
There's things that are out of control, and I think that if we can find our way with God and take the time to study where He wants to put us and how He guides us in our anger, I think that we would come out much better. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense." I can speak to this personally. I was just on the department a few months. Right as I had come on, Officer Terry McDowell had been shot and killed in Whitehall. They had his funeral. The substation that I was working out of was a man sub. I volunteered to work it because I couldn't work the street by myself. I was still training so that everybody else could go. There were two other gentlemen that had been assigned to work so the guys could go to the funeral. There was an incident of disrespect that occurred that I felt by one of the gentlemen that was there during what we call the final call. Radio comes on, they do what we call dropping tones, they give an alert tone, and she does a final call for the fallen officer. Well, the alert tones are also what we use for emergency runs. Well, when she drops the alert tones, one of the other officers in there comes running into where we were, and in a joking manner says, "Ha, 121, I got one running," while she's reading off the final call. I'd spent a lot of time with Terry's family because my partner was real good friends with some of his relatives. I took offense to that. We had words. They got kind of heated. They got broke up. some things were said at the end of the night when we were leaving because our supervisors found out, and I ended up getting called into IA. You know, they threatened to take my job because we had some words. I blew a gasket. Things went south. And for 12 years, I've got 16 years on now. For 12 years, I refused to speak to that individual. I refused to give him the time of day. And I noticed that every time I saw him, just like we talked about in the beginning, my blood pressure got higher and higher and higher. And, you know, I didn't work around him for a lot of years, and then I took an assignment where we were kind of out on the same side of town, and every time a run would go out and I'd hear him on the air, I would get angry. I would just get super angry. Well, when I started to make my turn to Christ, my partner at work at the time, one of the things that we had discussed a lot was, you know, anger and grace and forgiveness, and I had kind of told myself that that's the one thing that I needed to let go of. It held me for years, and it always caused me problems. He didn't know. Well, he did know, because usually our meetings were laced with profanities. So he knew, but you know, he probably didn't care as much as I cared. So, you know, I prayed about it. You know, me and my partner prayed about it, and I was able to let that go. Not completely. I mean, I still don't like him for what occurred, but God granted me the ability to let that go. You know, His guidance allowed me to let that go. I don't get that feeling inside now when you know, whenever I see him or hear him or anything else. I'm just able to kind of brush it off. You know, I found, depends on how you want to look at God's anger. I found 20 to 25 verses about God's anger and wrath. It also clarifies for us what is sinful anger and what is sanctified or approved anger in God's eyes. Sudden anger is a sinful anger. We often blame this on our short fuse or other nonsense that we can create to give ourselves excuses. It's that explosive response to being cut off in traffic, dished in a checkout line, or when someone disagrees with your political views. We've seen that all over the news now. You know, clearly that's not the way that God calls us to act with each other as a society. Proverbs 14:17 says, "A quick-tempered man does foolish things." Sudden anger is when this is most prevalent. This is where we often say things we will regret later, or worse, do something that can't be undone. You know, the shooting on the freeway, you cuss out a clerk because she gives you the wrong change, or your cheeseburger's got pickles, or, you know, whatever sets people off that day. You can't undo that. I mean, you got to take into consideration, you know, the family behind you with children that have now watched your outburst over something that they might consider minor. How are they going to process that and carry that on with themselves? You know, you're the role model, and yet this is the way you choose to act. Romans 12:19 tells us, "Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." God has made it clear, revenge anger is sinful, and He's the only one that has the right to vengeance. If you want to test whether your anger is sinful, answer these 4 questions. Is your anger directed towards a person? Is it anger without justification? Is there no real means to your anger, other than whatever excuse you want to make, or your short fuse, what have you? Does your anger seek vengeance? You know, or in your mind, are you planning a way to get back at this person for the way that, you know, that they've made you angry? Is it of an unforgiving spirit? Is this one of those things? I would say that my incident was unforgiving. I had no desire to forgive him. I wanted him to pay for that disrespect at my hands, for the most part. You know, so if you can answer yes to any of those questions, then your anger would be deemed sinful and should be condemned. Recognizing we have a problem with our tempers, in God's eyes, not our own. Again, we can make excuses for ours that doesn't make it seem like it's a problem. Once we recognize through God's eyes that we have a problem, then we can begin to address it. By denying we have a problem with our anger, allow sin to dig his heels in deeper, Satan to dig his heels in deeper. Do you realize the word anger is only 1 letter away from danger? Think about that for a second. In the situations that you've been in, road rage, or anything else, when, you know, people are yelling and screaming and carrying on, over something that's not really justified. It's, you know, they feel wronged or slighted. And how fast do those instances turn dangerous? You know, especially nowadays, things are getting worse. People are getting more violent, you know. You got to be mindful of those things. Physical health. Every time you get angry and your blood pressure spikes, it's a strain on your heart. It's a strain on your vessels. These are things that physically your doctor will tell you should avoid. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 19:19 that a hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. I mean, time and time again, the Bible tells us that our tempers are going to get us in trouble. Our angers are going to lead us astray. If we continue to chew on things and to let things bother us in such a manner, then that's just Satan's playground. We need to take time to refocus ourselves and learn how to deal with this anger without being explosive, without letting it cause us the physical distress and everything else that it does. The next anger that we'll discuss that you can find in the Bible is righteous anger. Not everything that falls under the heading of anger, examples are frustration, irritability, your annoyance, embarrassment, rejection, or blowing off steam, are violations of God's law. Yet when we are angry or dealing with these subcategories of anger, we are more likely to sin. These are the times where, you know, you get frustrated with something, you start to cuss, somebody comes up and asks you a question, now you're chewing their head off for no reason at all. You know, so anger itself is not a sin. There are examples of righteous anger in the Bible. Remember, Jesus himself was angry. You can refer to Mark 3:5. Jesus was angry about the uncaring attitudes of the Pharisees when they tried to challenge him for healing on the Sabbath. Jesus used his anger to right a wrong and correct the problem. We should follow suit and fight in constructive ways to lift someone up rather than tear them down. Oftentimes, when we get angry, it's just to lash out. That's what comes from it. There's nothing positive that comes from it. You know, maybe later on you buy your wife a dozen roses or something because you bet her head off for asking you where the car keys were. You know, in John 2:14 and 15, you can read where Jesus made whips from ropes and chased animals out and flipped over money changers' tables before forcing everyone from the temples. Who wouldn't love to respond to anger that way? Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, you can go out and make a whip and chase people around and flip over their stuff, and I mean, that would make my blood pressure drop instantly. That would be great. But God tells us that's not for us. You know, not everybody is granted the same powers that God is. Not everybody is granted the same powers, period. You know, police are granted arrest powers. Judges are granted the powers to sentence people to jail. You know, we're not necessarily granted that power to lash out in anger. You know, God tells us specifically, that's not us. Vengeance is his. So when you lash out in anger, vengefully towards someone, that's a sin, and you're just allowing Satan to take that foothold. Righteous anger is never about us, but about bettering humanity through the service of Christ. Do you remember when I mentioned sudden anger and gave examples of what sets you off? Mm-hmm. You know, being slighted, dished in line, cut off, wherever you wanted to be. What if we all got angry at the way people challenged our faith? If you had the same response when someone challenged your faith or when somebody said they didn't believe in Jesus, you know, what if you used anger at that to right that wrong, to educate them on your beliefs, on your following of Jesus, on the Bible? You know, there's several verses that you could refer to. And wouldn't that not fall under God's righteous anger? You know, you're going to get angry because somebody's questioning what you believe in. Instead of being angry and just starting an argument, use that as an education time. Give God's word. There's no better way to righteously respond to your anger. Mark 3:1-5 says that Jesus was tempted in all points, even as we are tempted, but he never sinned. So this passage teaches that Jesus became angry, but it wasn't sinful anger. It was sanctified anger, anger that has the right focus. Maybe this kind of anger is what the church needs to fire it up. Maybe this is what we need to attack the community. You know, we can sit and talk on Sundays about things that make us mad, but if we don't do anything in response to that, then what do? You know, if it's truly making you angry, then let's figure out a way to right that wrong. it's the selfishness in the kingdom instead of serving Jesus. It's those that just want to say that they're Christians and want to do this, but they don't live a Christian life. That should anger you. Instead of lashing out or cutting them off, reach out to them. Try to pull them into the kingdom. Guide them. We want to talk about, the rising crime rates and the acts of violence and things against our children. Well, let's come together and figure out a way to come up with programs, even in our community, to help keep kids out of trouble, to help keep, give them something to do for a couple hours here and there. I think back to a run that I had. It was a fire. It was Thanksgiving morning, and the call come in. There was a fire in an apartment. There were 2 children still trapped inside. Me and 2 other officers beat the fire engines there, which is no surprise. We get there, and as we're running up to figure out where the fire is, there's a gentleman standing out back, wrapped in a blanket, just pointing to a window. And instantly, the anger and rage that I felt at that gentleman, I almost forgot about the kids inside, because I wanted to throw him back into the building.
Yeah.
The 2 kids were in the basement. We were able to kick the window. By that time, the fire lieutenant's there. We're actually able to lower the fire lieutenant into the window, and he pulls out the 2 kids, hands them out the window. We get them to safety. I turn to address this male, and the fire lieutenant recognizes the rage that's going through me as I'm beelining through the grass at this gentleman. He stops me, kind of sidetracks me, kind of ushers me away. One of my supervisors shows up and realizes that this isn't the place I need to be, sends me away. I go away, I calm down. That run was one of my breaking points emotionally for me. They say that demons follow us. At that time I wasn't a believer. I wasn't in the Bible. However, I failed to use that anger in a positive way. Who knows what that gentleman had went through. Come to find out later, he might have made some attempts to get them out before calling. But they were his children as well. I should have taken that time, my anger, to voice to him, some concerns, to get him some help. What bothered me the most is that I got so angry that I drove away, and I drove far away, and I got myself into something else to avoid thinking about it. And I regret not going and getting the kids diapers and getting the kids some clothes. All their stuff was lost in that apartment. The Red Cross was on their way. I knew they were taken care of. The fire guys had them. They were making calls already. But that bothered me, that I let my anger overtake me so much, and I did nothing about it. I did nothing positive about it. Ephesians 4:26-27 says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil." The Bible doesn't tell us not to be angry, but it does point out how we should handle it and gives us advice and ways to deal with it. Let's get angry about and not let the sun go down on that anger. Let's get angry but not let the sun go down on that anger. Right. Don't allow the devil to have a foothold in your life or in our church. If we get angry with each other in church, let's make sure that we address it. God tells right there in Ephesians, it tells you, don't let the sun go down on that anger. If that happens, then it just causes a wider gap between those in the kingdom. Let's not allow that to happen. Let's agree as a congregation that we're not going to let the devil into our church in that manner. To close, I'd like to close with James 1:19-21. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you."